not accepting terrorism, and terrorism is not a part of Islam. And if people are representing that to you, then they've got the wrong twist on Islam.
All right. Well, notice once again, he's given his answer, right? So I keep waiting for him to actually deal with the passage, to actually get to what we're asking about. He doesn't manage to do it. What did he do here, right? So he gives his answer. He gives his answer to the question, what about the violence? What about the Quran's command to commit violence towards Jews and Christians? And what does he say? Well, he quotes Surah 3, verse 110, which says, "Ye are the best of peoples," talking to Muslims here, "ye are the best of peoples evolved from mankind." Who are the best of peoples? Muslims, according to the Quran. It's very interesting that he's quoting a passage to show that, Christians and Muslims are okay and we're all buddies. He quotes a passage that refers to Muslims as the best of peoples. Let's keep reading. "Ye are the best of peoples evolved from mankind, enjoining what is right, forbidding what is wrong, and believing in Allah. If only the people of the book had faith, it were best for them. Among them are some who have faith, but most of them are perverted transgressors." Most of who? Most of Christians and Jews. So there are some people, I have no clue what kind of people he's referring to here. The Quran seems to think that there are Christians who don't believe Jesus as the Son of God. There are no such Christians. But apparently there are some, there are Christians who deny that Jesus is the Son of God, and they're okay, according to the Quran. Every Christian I know believes Jesus is the Son of God. So the Quran says most of them, most of the Jews and most of the Christians are perverted transgressors. This is the verse that Yusuf quoted to show that Christians and Jews are okay. A verse that says Muslims are the best people and most Christians and Jews are perverted transgressors. That's the verse he quotes to show that Islam has no ill feelings towards Christians and Jews. Now, if that were all the Quran said, it would be disturbing, but that's not all the Quran says. Let's go to, since he quoted Surah 3 for us, what does Surah 3 verse 32 say? "Say, obey Allah and the Apostle, but if they turn back, then surely Allah does not love the unbelievers." Wait a minute, it says some of the Jews and Christians are believers, right? Most of us aren't believers, according to the Quran. And actually, if you go to Surah 5 of the Quran, it specifically says in Surah 5 that if you believe in the deity of Christ, if you're a Christian who believes in the deity of Christ, you are not a believer. So this verse says Allah doesn't love the unbelievers. Well, every Christian I know says Jesus is the Son of God. And according to the Quran, we're unbelievers. And according to the Quran, God doesn't love unbelievers. So are Christians and Muslims these great buddies and we're all on the same page here? Not at all. But let's keep reading. Surah 551, because Yusuf seems to think that Christians and Muslims and Jews should all be buddies. That's what he's telling people Islam teaches. Surah 551, "O you who believe, do not take the Jews and the Christians for friends. They are friends of each other. Muslims are commanded not to be friends towards us." But we know from Surah 328, if Muslims are in a Christian country, they can pretend to be friendly, even though they're not really supposed to be friendly in their hearts. They can be friends outwardly, but not inwardly. And since he's talking about what Islam teaches about Christians and Jews, how could he avoid Surah 98 verse 6? He quoted Surah 3 verse 110, which says Muslims are the best of peoples. Why not quote Surah 98 6, which specifically says what the status of Jews and Christians is? Surah 98 verse 6, "Verily those who disbelieve in the religion of Islam, the Quran, and Prophet Muhammad from among the people of the scriptures," that's Jews and Christians, "and al-mushrikun," that's the polytheists, "will abide in the fire of hell. They are the worst of creatures." According to the Quran, Muslims are the best of peoples. According to the Quran, anyone who's an Orthodox Christian is the worst of creatures. We're lower than rats. We're lower than pigs, according to the Quran. We are the worst of creatures. Why didn't Yusuf point out what we actually, why didn't he point out what the Quran actually teaches. People are asking him, right? He's supposedly answering questions. Why does the Quran teach these bad things about Jews and Christians? His response is to misrepresent it. He quotes Surah 3, verse 110. Oh, it says that some Christians are believers. What about the Christians like me who believe in actual Christian doctrines? It says we are the worst of creatures. Muslims are the best of peoples. We are the worst of creatures. Again, lower than any disgusting animal you could think of. Any worse than insects. We're the worst. And why is Allah that concerned about what we believe? Well, because that's the worst thing you can do in Islam. It's shirk. That's worse than killing someone, committing shirk. And let's look at the result of this. So Muslims are the best of peoples. We're the worst of creatures. Is Allah going to allow Christianity to spread? Is he going to allow us to go around preaching this message? What's the result? The result is that Muslims are commanded to fight and subjugate us and to silence us. That's what people are asking Yusuf Estes about. Could you explain this? And he totally tiptoes around the issue, never discusses the passage, goes to other parts of the Quran, misrepresents and distorts the Quran to act like we're all okay. What are Muslims actually commanded to do? Not according to me, not according to Yusuf Estes, according to Allah in the Quran. Muslims are commanded to, Surah 9:29, fight those who believe not in Allah nor the last day, nor hold that forbidden which hath been forbidden by Allah and his messenger, nor acknowledge the religion of truth, you don't acknowledge Islam, from among the people of the book, that's Jews and Christians, until they pay the jizya with willing submission and feel themselves subdued. So Muslims are commanded to fight us and subjugate us and force us to pay tribute, and we will be in a state of subjugation where we don't go around preaching our views. Why are Muslims commanded to do this? Next verse. The Jews call Uzair a son of God, and the Christians call Christ the Son of God. That is a saying from their mouth. In this they but imitate what the unbelievers of old used to say, Allah's curse be on them, how they are deluded away from the truth. Next verse, they take their priests and their anchorites to be their lords in derogation of Allah, and they take as their Lord Christ, the Son of Mary, yet they were commanded to worship but one God. There is no God but He. Praise and glory to Him, far is He from having the partners they associate with Him. Fain would they extinguish Allah's light with their mouths. This is talking about what we preach, the beliefs we share with other people with our mouths. Fain would they extinguish Allah's light with their mouths, but Allah will not allow, but that His light should be perfected, even though the unbelievers may detest it. It is He who hath sent His messenger, Muhammad, with guidance and the religion of truth to prevail it over all religion, even though the pagans may detest it. So Allah is not going to allow us to extinguish His light with our mouths. He sent Muhammad to prevail His religion over ours, to subjugate us so that we can't go out preaching these false views. I'd love to know what Yusuf Estes has to say about that, but whenever people bring it up, whenever people bring these passages up, what does he do? He makes up a fake question that we're not asking. Why are you commanded to kill and slaughter all Jews and Christians? And then he ignores that. And then he ignores what the Quran actually teaches. He goes to different parts of the Quran. And he just makes up everything. Oh, Christians and Jews are fine according to Islam. Really? That's your position? So this, we watched an entire response from Yusuf Estes yesterday. And we watched an entire response from him today, asking the same kind of question. What about fighting? What about fighting the Jews and Christians? He did the exact same thing both times. So is this accidental? Does Yusuf Estes has he just skipped Surah 9? Does his Quran not have Surah 9 in it? Or is he deliberately avoiding these passages because he doesn't want us to know about what the Quran actually teaches? Now, Yusuf Estes has been repeatedly challenged to debate. Do you now have an idea of why he won't get on stage? Yusuf Estes is very good at what he does. And so he likes a platform where someone gets to ask a question, he gets to misrepresent the question, misrepresent the criticism, and then spout a bunch of nonsense that doesn't actually deal with the issue. But if people in the audience, if people who are listening to him don't know what the Quran actually teaches, they think he's given some great answer. They think he's responded to the issue, and he hasn't. That's the sort of atmosphere, that's the sort of environment that Yusuf Estes is comfortable with. What would happen if he were on stage in a debate format And the question came up from the audience, what about fighting the Jews and Christians? Well, Yusuf Estes would get up, respond, and what's going to happen if me or if Sam Shamoun or James White or someone else gets up to respond? We're going to say, why did you go to Surah 2, verse 190, which is what he did yesterday? Why did you go to Surah 3, verse 110? You were asked about what the Quran teaches about fighting Jews and Christians. It says it right here. Why are you avoiding this passage? Why are you saying that Islam doesn't allow terrorism when I can quote your prophet and the Quran saying it does? Why are you saying these things? Why did you quote Surah 5, verse 32? Totally massacre what the verse is actually saying. Ignore the fact that the verse was a Jewish teaching. Ignore the next verse, which commands you to kill people who do what we do. Why did you do that, Yusuf? And again, he would be absolutely humiliated. He'd be embarrassed, and people would learn what Islam actually teaches. And you don't want that. The goal of Muslim apologists in the West is to keep us from knowing what Islam actually teaches, as they're allowed to do from Surah 328. And you can't do that. If you're Yusuf Estes, you can't do that by having someone on stage to respond to what you say. That's why he won't debate, and he knows it, and he knows that. Very disturbing. All right, we have some callers. Before we go on to Zakir Naik, let's take a couple of calls very quickly, and then we'll get on to some video clips by one of Islam's greatest champions today, according to what Muslims tell me. We'll see if Zakir Naik can do a better job of defending Islam against the claim that it promotes violence. All right, who do we have on the line? Charlie?
Hi.
Hey.
I just want to thank you so much for the talk show. It's very, very insightful. And,
oh, thank you.
I just noticed something about saying how the Muslims are the best of people and about how we are the worst of people.
Mm-hmm.
That's a very vast contrast between what Christianity teaches about
Absolutely.
About how we're all sinners, mm-hmm. and the only difference is whether or not we're forgiven mm-hmm. by the grace of the Lord Jesus Christ. Mm-hmm. And do you mind if I ask a quick question about? I think it's a common Muslim objection to Christianity.
Yeah, if it's something I can answer quickly, if it's going to like prevent us from getting to the Zakir Naik clips, then we'll put it off to a different time. But what is it?
Oh, I was just I think people like Zakir Naik say stuff. They quote Matthew 24:36 about saying how Jesus doesn't know when the second coming is, mm-hmm. and only the Father knows. Mm-hmm. They're trying to deny his deity, mm-hmm. and if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
Or, I don't know if that was going to be too long or.
No, I'll give a quick response to that.
Oh, thank you.
Let me just pull the passage up so I can read it for everyone. All right. All right, so we have, well, first of all, your comment was right on. And it's very important to keep in mind the contrast between what Islam teaches about believers and non-believers versus what Christianity teaches about believers and non-believers. In Islam, since in Islam, God doesn't love you first. God loves you after you've done a bunch of good things and you've believed in him and you've cast aside false beliefs and so on. Then God loves you. Well, guess what? Now he loves you because of all these good things you're doing. So it's you. You're the good person, right? So in Islam, if you're a believer, you're a good Muslim, well, you're the best of people. You're the best of people. If, on the other hand, you're a Christian, you're committing the worst possible sin by not believing in Allah correctly, you're believing in Jesus as the Son of God and so on, then you're the worst of creatures because you're committing the worst possible sin. The reason you're the worst of creatures is, a rat or a pig doesn't know any better, right? The rat or the pig or the cockroach or whatever hasn't been given true revelation and then rejected it. But they're not capable of rejecting the truth or of associating partners with God, of committing shirk. They're not capable of it. So they're somewhere in the middle. But Christians who say Jesus is the Son of God, we've actually committed the worst possible sin, a sin that animals just can't do in that way. So we are worse. We're worse than them because we had the opportunity to believe correctly and we didn't do it. So we're these horrible things. But if you contrast it with Christianity, if Muslims out there who don't know what we believe, we are taught we're all sinners. We are all worthy of judgment. We all deserve to be punished by God. And when God forgives us as Christians, it's not because of what we've done. It wasn't that we went out and did all kinds of things for God and then he started liking us. God forgave us, not because of what we've done. It's through grace. It's not something that we earned. We didn't earn God's forgiveness. God gave it, and we didn't deserve it. So Christians don't look around and say, "Oh, I'm much better than him." That's condemned. That sort of attitude. I'm great. Other people are bad. That's what the Quran teaches about Muslims, right? Muslims are good. Other people are bad. That attitude is strictly condemned in the Bible. We don't look around and say, "Oh, I'm a good guy and everyone else is bad and evil." Not at all. We're all sinners in need of salvation. We are saved not because of ourselves. We are saved because of what God has done for us. Now, on the objection, this is Matthew chapter 24, verse 36. And you can see why a Muslim would appeal to this, but let's look at what Jesus actually says. He's talking about Judgment Day, right? So he's talking about when the end is going to come. So he says, "Truly I say to you, this generation will not pass until all these things take place. Heaven and earth will pass away, but my words will not pass away. But of that day and hour no one knows, not even the angels of heaven, nor the Son, but the Father alone. For the coming of the Son of Man will be just like the days of Noah. For as in those days before the flood, they were eating and drinking, marrying and giving in marriage, until the day that Noah entered the ark. And they did not understand until the flood came and took them all away. So will the coming of the Son of Man be." Now, the objection here is Jesus says he doesn't know the day of the final judgment. So, obviously, God is all-knowing, right? God is all-knowing. He's omniscient. He knows everything. But Jesus here says he doesn't know something. And since Jesus says he doesn't know something, obviously he can't be God, because there's nothing that God doesn't know. God knows everything. That's the claim against this passage. Now let's look a bit more closely and let's take it in the context of Christian theology. First of all, very important to note what this verse actually says, because Jesus establishes a hierarchy here. He sets out some levels here. Of that day and hour, no one knows. No one, referring to people, right? So he's talking to all these people. Of that day and hour, no one knows, so no man knows, not even the angels. So he's saying no human beings know, not even the angels, nor the Son, but only the Father. So before we even consider what this means in the light of Christian theology, where is Jesus on this hierarchy? No people know, no men know, no angels know, not even the Son, only the Father. So Jesus is putting himself, right here at the beginning, above men and above angels in the context here. So right away, if Muslims are pointing this and say, you see, this confirms Islam, according to Islam, is Jesus better than all other human beings, even greater than the angels? Not according to Islam, he's not. Not according to Islam. So Muslims should be very disturbed by this passage, not quoting it to show that Islam is correct. But we have to ask ourselves, we're still left with the question, why does Jesus say he doesn't know something? And one thing we have to point out is there seems to be a difference between Jesus right here and Jesus after his resurrection, because he's asked the same question. He's asked the same question at the beginning of the book of Acts. His followers are there, and they ask him, hey, are you going to restore the kingdom of Israel at this time? And there he doesn't say, hey, I don't know, only the Father knows. There he says, it's not for you to know. So I'm not telling you. So we see a difference between Jesus before this resurrection and after his resurrection. But according to Christian theology, we have to read this in the light of Christian theology. And here we have the doctrine of kenosis. And let me bring up the passage. The most important passage here would be Philippians chapter 2. We have to go to a break right after this. But read Philippians chapter 2. And here we have this doctrine of kenosis. What was involved in Jesus entering creation? Philippians chapter 2, beginning at verse 5. Have this attitude in yourselves, which was also in Christ Jesus, who, although he existed in the form of God, did not regard equality with God a thing to be grasped, but emptied himself, taking the form of a bondservant, and being made in the likeness of men. Being found in appearance as a man, he humbled himself by becoming obedient to the point of death, even death on a cross. So here you have Jesus laying aside his glory to enter into creation. And if Muslims want to say, well, that's the Apostle Paul, if you'd prefer one of Jesus' apostles, the Apostle John says the exact same thing in the first chapter of the book of John, where he says, in the beginning was the Word was with God, the Word was God. Says the Word created all things, and then goes on to say the Word became flesh. The Word became flesh and dwelt among us. And also later on in the Gospel of John, you have Jesus telling his followers, you should be glad that I'm leaving, because now I can go back to the glory I had before the foundation of the world. So you have the idea that Jesus is laying aside his glory. He's entering creation, and by entering creation, he's not using all of his divine attributes. He's obviously not using, if he's a person walking around, he's not using his attribute of omniscience, being everywhere. I mean, of omnipotence. I mean, of any of these things. He's not using his omnipotence, for instance. For if Jesus needs food, he gets food. He doesn't just use his omnipotence. He was even invited to do that by Satan. Hey, you're the Son of God. Tell these stones to become bread. He didn't do it. So what you have, according to Christian theology, when Jesus enters into creation, he has the voluntary non-use of his divine attributes. He doesn't use them. He doesn't use them. He can't use them because he has to kind of avoid using these if he's going to actually live as a human being. Now, Muslims can say, oh, that's nonsense. That's so weird. That's so disturbing. My Muslim friends, you have to believe that God doesn't always use his attributes. Even you, laying Christianity aside for a second, you have to believe that God doesn't always use all his attributes. God's perfectly good according to you, right? And God is all-powerful. So God could, according to Islam, make everyone do exactly what he wants. God could make us all believe in him and not commit shirk, right? But he doesn't do that. He doesn't do that. What's he doing? He's not using an attribute that he could use. He's not using an attribute. He's not using his perfect power to get something that he wants. He's voluntarily not using that power. Well, it's on a different level because we believe Jesus enters into his creation and lays aside the use of these attributes. But it's kind of a similar idea. God doesn't have to use his attributes, and Jesus, when he's in this world, doesn't use his omniscience to know absolutely everything that only God would know. So that's the answer. Again, Muslims can deny it and say it's nonsense, but that's what Jesus claimed. That's what the Bible claims about him. That's what the Bible tells us. So that claim, he doesn't know something that God would know, makes perfect sense in the light of Christian theology. But we can totally ignore Christian theology, pick out one verse, pretend that it supports Islam when it obviously doesn't because it puts Jesus higher than the angels. It's very easy to do that, but when you look at it as the total package here, when you look at Christian theology, it makes perfect sense, right? If Jesus is entering into creation, not voluntarily not using some of his attributes, then if you ask him something that would require him to use his attributes, yes, I can't do it. Because in entering into creation, he volunteered not to use those attributes. A Muslim can say, I don't believe that. A Muslim can say, I reject that. But the claim is that this doesn't fit in with Christianity. The claim is this refutes your belief. It doesn't refute our belief. It fits in perfectly with our belief. And so if Muslims want to say that Christianity is false, they're going to have to come up with some other ground because that verse fits in perfectly with what Christians believe. All right, we have to take a quick break. We'll be back in just a moment with some clips from our good friend Zakir Naik here on Jesus or Muhammad. Welcome back to Jesus or Muhammad. We want to get to some clips from Zakir Naik to see that he's doing the same thing that Yusuf Estes and other Muslims are doing. But we have calls. I don't want the calls to build up, so I'm going to take a couple of calls very quickly. I'm going to ask everyone to keep the questions short and try to stay on the topic, because we have less than an hour left. So if we start changing topics, we're going to run into some problems. We're not going to get to the clips. I at least want to get to a couple of the night clips. So let's go to callers real quick. Who do we have on the line?
Hello.
Hello.
Hello. Praise the Lord, brother. Good morning. About Zakir Naik, as topic yesterday, I've seen many of his clips, very disturbing. Again, when it comes to debates, even the Christians from the audience have asked him to debate, and he says he wants 10,000 people, at least Christians, in the audience for him to agree to a debate. And that's again, ridiculous. If Christians want to debate him because they have the truth, if he thinks he has the truth, why does numbers have to matter? Why does he need 10,000 people?
There's no question, but Zakir has to know. Zakir has to know, and there's no question that he knows. In the West, 10,000 people don't show up to a debate. You'd have to rent like a football stadium or something like that. He knows no Christian debater. He knows James White or Sam Shamoun or me. We're not going to rent the Superdome or something like that to have a debate. We'd have a debate. We'd have it in a setting that could fit maybe 1,000 or 2,000 or something like that, like a big church. We'd record the debate, and then tens of thousands of people would watch it. They'd watch it online. But Zakir Naik is putting this challenge out here. Oh no, only if you get something, only if you can guarantee 10,000. Really, I have no idea how you'd even do that, right? So suppose you did rent the Superdome. How can you say this number of people is going to show up? How can you even say that? He knows we can't, and so he's putting out this kind of ridiculous challenge. And he's been in debates before where he didn't have that many people. Why is it that when he's challenged by actual debaters, suddenly this rule comes into play that he doesn't care about? Again, if some random pastor challenged him to a debate, he'd be ready to do it. If an experienced debater challenges him, suddenly this rule comes into play. But you're absolutely right. If he's concerned about the truth, let's suppose one person was at the debate. Does he not care about that one person? Does he not want that one person to believe in Islam? Does he not want to expose Christianity for that one person? What about 200? What about 500? What about 1,000? Zakir Naik goes around in the West all the time. He speaks in all kinds of places where there are 50, 100, 200 people there. Why is it that as soon as someone challenges him to a debate, I'm sorry, I don't go unless you've got a football stadium full of people? Absolute cowardice on his part.
Yes.
Want to continue?
Yes. So in the same clip, I think, and he said, "Why should I make you famous?" As in, he thinks he's famous. It's like Yusuf Estes is saying this, that according to Quran, Muslims are the best of people. Why should he be worried about making someone else famous? He should be self-sacrificing, right? So he shouldn't really worry about that. Again, just contrast between the program Jesus or Muhammad and his, show, as in his when he speaks. You put a question out, and if anyone has a real answer, you take the full answer, and any doubt, you get to the bottom of it. You give them a full opportunity to talk. On the contrast, when someone in the audience of, Zakir Naik shows, if they have the real answer, he changes it. He puts them behind the queue. He humiliates them. It's very disturbing to watch. He said, if anyone can show me one verse where Jesus said, "I am God," then I'll be a Muslim today. And someone in the audience did show him that when Lord asks Peter, "Who do you think I am?" He said, you are Jesus, the Son of God. He said, and Jesus accepts that statement. So, obviously, that is showing that he is Son of God. And he said, that doesn't meet my criteria. So, well, he changed the subject again. Just two other things. This is off topic, so you don't have to answer me today. If you just keep it in mind and maybe answer later. If shirk is unforgivable in Islam, How can a Christian ever be converted to Islam? It's just unforgivable by Allah. So he can never be misconverted to Islam because there's no opportunity, there's no chance to repent of shirk. So I just think and don't know the answer to that. And just yesterday's and today's programs, when can we watch them on YouTube or anywhere?
When can we watch what? When can we watch what?
Yesterday's and today's. This is from Muhammad.
If you go to ABN has a YouTube page, and they post all of these shows on their YouTube page. So they are available on YouTube. If you go to ABN's site, they have links to their YouTube page, and so I think they actually have a separate page for Jesus or Muhammad. So I know the episode from yesterday is already posted, so you can watch them there. Let me answer your question very quickly as far as shirk being unforgivable. Because you have passages of the Quran which refer to shirk as unforgivable, and then obviously people are forgiven of shirk because Muhammad's companions were polytheists. They were pagans before they accepted Islam. So they were committing shirk. How is this possible? The general way of reconciling this is that shirk is unforgivable if you don't repent of it before you die. So any other sin, according to this view, that you commit before you die, Allah might just forgive you for it. Right? So if you go around killing 1,000 people and you die, Allah might decide to forgive you because according to the hadith, Allah can take the sins of Muslims and put them on the backs of Jews and Christians. So Muslims, according to this view, can commit all kinds of sins, and Allah is going to punish the Jews and Christians for those sins. So He can forgive all of those sins. But the sin of shirk, because you're not a Muslim, now you're something else. You're a Christian or you're a pagan or something like that. That He's not going to forgive you for. So the idea is that's unforgivable if you don't repent of it. Other sins, even if you don't repent of them, Allah might forgive you. And so again, the disturbing part about this is if this is correct, you can do all kinds of sins, and Allah might just let you go. And Muhammad even said in Sahih Muslim, people will come on the judgment day, referring to Muslims. Muslims will come before him on the judgment day, some of them with sins as heavy as a mountain. And Allah will put a Jew or a Christian in their place in hell. So Allah will punish Jews and Christians in the place of Muslims who have sins as heavy as a mountain. So really, really bad sinners. That's some very interesting stuff. As far as going back to what you said about Zakir Naik saying, why should I make anyone famous? Debating Naik does not make you famous. I bought the Zakir Naik debate collection. I had not heard of anyone there except for William Campbell. And William Campbell I wouldn't say is famous. I know who he is because I'm involved in apologetics and I have his book on science and the Quran. But if you go to a person on the street or even a person who's involved in debate, lots of people won't know who William Campbell is. So I don't know of anyone that Zakir Naik has ever made famous. He's not making people famous because he's not debating anyone that anyone's ever heard of. He's debating people that are with the exception of William Campbell, I've never heard of any of these people. So what we have here, again, is just an excuse. Zakir Naik would view the things I'm saying about Christianity as false. And I'm telling them all kinds of people. Muslims watch this show. Muslims are watching this show. And according to Naik, they're being deceived, right? The Muslims are being deceived. Christians are being deceived by me because I'm criticizing Islam and I'm defending Christianity. Why would he not want to expose me and end my credibility? Why would he not want to come on there and expose me and then I would not have any kind of influence? Why would he not want to expose James White? Why would he not want to expose Sam Shamoon? Why wouldn't he want to do that? End our influence. And the answer is because he knows what would happen. He knows that the little, cute little answers he gives when he's alone on the microphone would be obliterated by someone who actually knows about Christianity and Islam. So thank you, sister, and thank you for watching. Let's go to the next caller, and we'll take two more callers real quick, and then we'll go to a couple of clips. All right, who do we have on the line?
Hello?
Hello.
Brother David?
Yeah, how's it going?
Okay, I have comments I'd like to share with you.
Okay.
I was reading about the history of Muhammad and Islam,
Okay.
And I found that Muhammad spent the first 20 years of his trying to spread his message in Mecca, and he had only 60 followers in 20 years in Mecca, peacefully. He had 20 followers. Then he fled to Medina, and then I was reading about Syria, the history of Syria in Wikipedia, and I found in Syria that I guess at the time of Muhammad was part of the Roman Empire, and actually in that writing on Wikipedia it states that there was 3 Roman emperors from Syria. And Syria at the time of Muhammad encompassed like Syria, Palestine, Jordan, Lebanon, and part of Iraq. And the people there did not speak Arabic, so they had different language. And Syria was conquered in the year 12 of Hijrah. So here, in 20 years, Muhammad tried to spread his message peacefully. He was able to have only 60 people follow him. And in 12 years after his hijrah to Medina, he conquered Arabia, which is now Saudi Arabia, all Arabia, and conquered the surrounding countries. And those people in the surrounding countries did not speak Arabic. So you could imagine then the Muslim invaders invading these neighboring countries who did not speak their language. And I doubt even the Muslim invaders knew enough about Islam, because only few people knew the Quran or Islam. I think the only part about Islam they knew, those invaders, were Surah Al-Anfal, which is the spoil of war. I think that was their only motivation, that Muhammad will get 1/5 of the spoils and the fighters will get 4/5. I think that was their only motivation. And, in 12 years, he conquered all these countries, and, that wasn't peacefully. Because peacefully, he was only able to get only 60 people. And Arabic language has not become official like in Syria until the year 70 of Hijrah. That's after the transfer of the seat of the caliph from Arabia or from Mecca to Damascus. So, when they talk about peace for religion, people have to go back to the history and see how did Islam spread.
Well, you're absolutely correct in what you said, except for maybe a little bit of the dates, but your overall point, absolutely correct. The general timeline here, most people would say Muhammad's born around 570. He receives his first revelation around 610. For a while, he doesn't preach Islam publicly. He preaches it in private, to his wife or to his relatives or to his friends. But he doesn't go out publicly proclaiming Islam, publicly condemning the religion of the polytheists.
He couldn't spread it the way he did when he moved to Medina.
Oh, yeah. There's no question. So around 610. So
do it, if we take Christ for instance, Christ, he was on this. He tried to spread his message in 3 years. And when he died, he had about 120 true believers. Even though he made miracles, he fed 4,000 one time, 5,000 another time. He showed miracles, raised the dead, and all this. It's not easy to change people's religion and faith and heart. But what Islam criticized and the Quran, that Jesus did not die and did not get crucified. If Jesus did not rise from the dead, Christianity would be dead. Christianity was spread because Jesus died and rose from the dead, and all those people who saw his miracles and did not believe, now they believe. So Christianity spread after the death and resurrection of Jesus.
And brother, that's very important what you just pointed out. Christianity spread. So Jesus preaches for 3 years in public. He dies, he rises from the dead. Then his followers, his handpicked followers, go out and they're preaching a message, but they have an actual argument. They have a miracle on their hands to preach Christianity. And their message was, Jesus died on the cross. He did this in public. You all know it. And he rose from the dead. We're his witnesses, and we actually have a list of over 500 witnesses who saw him risen from the dead. So they have evidence. They have evidence. It's a public. We have a public event, and we have a miraculous resurrection with numerous witnesses willing to be killed, and will not renounce this belief. That message spread rapidly. You start having thousands of people converting throughout in the book of Acts. People are, Peter's first sermon, thousands of people convert to Christianity, and then they go out. It spreads over the Roman Empire, and Christianity within 3 centuries, takes over the Roman Empire, the most powerful empire the world had ever seen. Christianity takes it over without shedding one drop of blood. Now, to go back to your point about Mecca and Medina, Muhammad preaches, depending on the source, the hadith will say either 10 years or 12 years. We'll say 12 because, in general, they would date Muhammad's first revelation at 610 and the flight to Medina in 622. So we'll say 12 years Muhammad preaches in Mecca. And the numbers vary. Some will say 60, some will say 100. Let's say 100. He gets about 100 followers after 12 years of preaching. So this isn't exactly a Billy Graham crusade, right, where you have thousands of people converting. So after years of using his argument, and his argument at that time was, look at my wonderful poetry in the Quran. Isn't it obviously from God? He didn't win followers. So, think about it. If he gets 100 over a period of more than 10 years, he's averaging less than one a month. He's averaging less than one convert per month. He eventually leaves Mecca. He goes to Medina, and 8 years later, just 8 years later, so he preaches for 12 years, wins, let's say, 100 converts. 8 years later, he marches into Mecca at the head of an army of 10,000. So that's not even all the believers. Not all believers were fighting, and this isn't including the men. He already has, let's say, 20 or 30,000 followers. What happened between Mecca and Medina? The message changed. Islam changed from, look at my beautiful poetry in the Quran. The message changed to, let's go out, we'll conquer the unbelievers, we'll fight them, we'll subjugate them, we'll rape their women, we'll take all their treasures, we'll do it to everyone, we'll do it to the Romans, we'll do it to the Persians, we'll take all their stuff, we'll get rich, I'll give you stuff, you will split the war spoils with me, and if you disagree with me, I'm going to kill you, so make your choice. That message spread like crazy, and that spread all the way to Spain. Within a few generations, had spread all the way to Spain in the west, and had spread all the way to India in the east. And it would be surprising if that kind of message didn't spread. But you're absolutely correct. We see the contrast between the way Christianity spread, which is based on a miracle. We see the way that Islam spread based on appealing to people's worst desires, their desire to ravish women, their desires for wealth and money, their desire to rob people and take what other people have worked for. And so Muhammad could say, as we saw, that he was made victorious through terror. He wasn't made victorious through preaching. He wasn't made victorious through hard work. He was made victorious through terrorizing people. So if you're an enemy of Islam, you are scared to death, and the message is, come, and if you join me, you'll get tons of stuff, and in the hereafter, you'll get the houris, you'll get these perpetual virgins, and you can spend all eternity deflowering virgins, because that's the sort of people he was trying to get in his army. Very disturbing, but I agree with you completely. Let's go to our next caller very quickly, and then we have to get to some clips because we only have about a half an hour left. Who do we have next? Manu.
Hello. Yes, hi.
How you doing, Manu?
Good, thank you. Your point about chapter 5:32, it's a direct command toward those who wage war against the and they try to do corruption on earth.
Okay.
That verse is actually talking about those who wage war against God and His prophets, because the word Yaharabun is the waging war. Your chapter 3:151 that you said about casting terror in the hearts of those who disbelieve, Actually, the Arabic word is kafaru, which means those who disbelieve. And the letter ta, if it's a null a, that means soon we will cast. If in Arabic it shows the verb being, it's not like a perpetual. It's soon this is going to happen. It's like it's going to happen. So there's the null a, وَقُلُوبَ الَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا, which means soon we will cast in the hearts of those who disbelieve. It's not a perpetual thing. You were trying to say that by the hadith that you were bringing, that it's going to be by the, God will cast terror in the hearts of those who disbelieve. It's not disbelief. Those who disbelieved is past tense. And I had one more point about the chapter 262. It really, God gives the promise of those to the people of the book that if they do believe and do good things and believe in the last day and so forth, then their wages are for them and they will not have any fear. Chapter 98 of the Quran, it really puts that in contrast, meaning it gives the option in verse 7 saying that if they believe, they would be khair al-bariyah. Khair is the best of. They would become best of creation if they did. But if they reject Prophet Muhammad, then they have that potential to be shar al-bariyah. Shar is pretty much like, the best way you can describe it is it's like a plaguing like something that's a blight, on a or something that would be like hounding you and trying to harm you. So that's what it's not. The translation is not as best as it could be when it says it's the worst of creation or creatures. It's shar al-bariyah means those, they become like a plaguing and hounding and harming creation if they disbelieve. Those are my points. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Manu. And let's go through those points very quickly, and then we'll go to our first Zakir Naik clip. You said, I think that 532, I think you're referring to 533. Maybe there are some different numberings of the Quran when it says to making war against Allah. That's 533 in most translations. I don't know if the Quran only Muslims have a different have the numbering system that's one off. The Ahmadis do. But you said that let's say 533 is talking only about making war against against Muhammad. Even in the historical context it's usually given, that doesn't fit. Now, you're a Quran-only Muslim, so you might reject these sources, but the stories that are usually involved in this verse, the story is usually the one about the people coming to Muhammad, and he tells them to go ahead and drink some weird stuff, and they go and they don't get better. And, well, according to the sources, they did get better, and then they rejected Islam. Doesn't make any sense. Obviously, Muhammad told them how to get better, how to get over their illness. They went and drank some stuff, and they didn't get better, and they rejected Islam. And according to some of the sources, they killed someone, and so this was the justification. But Muhammad burned out their eyeballs with hot nails and chopped off their hands and feet and left them out in the burning sun. Lots of the Muslim sources will say this is the sort of thing it's talking about. But let's go with best case scenario, right? Now, if all kinds of Muslims would say, it says, Manu, it says spreading corruption in the land or making mischief in the land. Let's go with the most extreme interpretation for your case, the best interpretation a Muslim could give, the one that would be least concerning to us. At the very least, if you have a military presence in a Muslim land, you qualify as someone who has to die. That's what you said, right? That was your position. It involves warfare, right? So if this involves warfare, then guess what? According to Islam, we're doing that. The United States is doing that. Great Britain is doing that. Australia is doing that. Why? Because we all have a military presence in a Muslim land fighting against Muslims. So all of us, according to your interpretation of this verse, where spreading corruption in the land only refers to fighting, going out and being at war with people, according to your interpretation, we're doing that, and so we're fair game. And I don't know if you would accept this. And if people don't know what we're talking about right now, when I say that Manu doesn't accept the sources, Orthodox Muslims, in other words, the vast majority of Muslims, 99-point-something% of Muslims believe in the Quran and the Hadith. So they take the Quran as authoritative, but they also take the Hadith, the words and deeds of Muhammad, as authoritative. Manu is from a very small sect of Islam that is regarded as heretical by most Muslims, who only believes in the Quran. He doesn't accept the Hadith or Muhammad's statements in the Hadith as authoritative for belief. Only the Quran. So since Manu only believes in the Quran, he can ignore Muhammad's interpretations of these verses. He can ignore how Muhammad's companions interpreted these verses. And so he can say, well, I think it means this. Whereas most Muslims would say, here's how Muhammad and his followers interpret it, therefore I'm stuck with that. So going with Manu's interpretation, we'd have to say the United States falls into that category. Great Britain, Australia, a bunch of other countries all fall into that